this, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone, this brings us to the last session of the day. Ray Stephenson, Tessa Kriesel, Kevin Blanco, and Esther Agbaje will be diving into content curation for multiple developer audiences and will help us to explore different ways to make this as meaningful and targeted as possible. Ray, we can kick off the discussion. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Steve. And it's my pleasure to welcome everybody here. I've had a chance to talk to Tessa, Kevin, and Esther a couple of weeks ago, different times for different people. Really excited to have this group of people who have different levels and backgrounds in terms of experiences with developer relations and the different types of content that developers expect. And worked with all of them to kind of come up with a set of questions that we thought would be interesting for all of you to hear in this panel. So the first thing I'd like to do is just start with a little bit of intro, like a brief intro about yourself, and then tell me a little bit about the different audiences that you deal with from the current job that you have. So I'll let all of you go first, and then I'll go last. So I'll call in the order that it actually shows up for me. So Tessa, if you don't mind going first.
Absolutely. So Tessa Kriesel, I am head of platform developer relations over at Snap, as most of you know it as Snapchat. I work on our Camera Kit platform, which is a really kind of cool and exciting platform for augmented reality experiences. So as I think about audiences currently in the AR industry, there are what I consider those as creators versus those that are developers, right? So there's the ones that are creating that really cool cutting edge artwork to create those lenses and experiences versus the technical folks that are integrating and implementing that. And sometimes they're the same, right? Sometimes they're using both of those really great skills, but often they're different. And it's really important for me to be able to connect those audiences together, especially in their work and, through our platform. So yeah, quick intro there for me.
Excellent. Thank you. Kevin, you're the next one in order.
Hey, thank you, Ray. Tessa, Esther, it's a pleasure to be along with you in this journey. Well, hello, everyone. I hope you're doing great. Also, thank you to the DevRelX community and obviously Ray for hosting this panel. I'm Kevin Blanco. I'm a senior developer advocate at Appsmith. Appsmith is the best no-code and low-code platform to empower developers and businesses to build rich, interactive dashboards and data-driven applications on the top of their existing databases, APIs, and services without the need for extensive coding. It is the ultimate tool, for creating custom internal tools that help businesses streamline processes, monitor data, and make informed decisions. Apart from that, I'm also a Google developer expert advocate, and that has taken me to speak at multiple events worldwide about Google Cloud, artificial intelligence, and teach communities around these technologies. Before working at Appsmith, I worked as a technical director for a large digital agency based in New York City, where I led infrastructure, architecture, engineering, and digital product innovation for multiple large customers. And prior to that, I had multiple positions as developers, technical lead, tech manager, building solutions for companies such as IBM, Watson, Microsoft, Nintendo, and Google as well. Aside from my career tech part, I've been always involved in open source and development communities like the Drupal community and the JavaScript community, and that is why I've landed in the developer relations area. Actually, I don't have a formal computer science degree, actually. I dropped the fourth year and dedicated to work and get certifications and learn what I needed to continue growing in my career. What I'm formally graduated is from film school, where I learned everything about film production, script and screenplay writing, storytelling, shooting on cinema formats and post-production. And lastly, I'm also a private pilot license, and I fly airplanes just for fun. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Kevin. And you forgot to tell me about your audiences. What do you think about your audiences?
Well, our audiences is pretty much developers who are trying to speed up their development processes. They're trying not to reinvent the wheel, and they're trying to understand how they can achieve more with less. So they are always trying to learn more. So pretty much most of the things that I do is to innovate in terms of their knowledge, trying to give them tutorials, content, and how to use the platform, which is really big. So it's very tech savvy, but also their businesses, because the product is not only for people who are developers, but also for businesses who might have data on data sheets, and they're trying the way to report back to their product owners or stakeholders, but they don't know anything about programming. And Appsmith is also great for them to do that because you don't require any coding skills or programming. So it's interesting because I have very tech developer people and also non-tech developer people. And speaking to those audiences in a different way, it's very challenging, but it's also very encouraging. So yeah, that's the type of audiences that we have.
Great. Thank you so much. Esther, your turn.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Esther Agbaje. I work as a developer advocate at Directus. I have a background in front-end engineering, and I've been in DevRel for about 3 years now. For those that are not familiar with what we do at Directus is a platform to help developers, teams, agencies to build their websites, applications using our headless CMS solution, backend as a service infrastructure, and even our internal tools. So as a developer advocate at Directus, you will find me mostly working on documentation. Maybe there's a new feature and, I have to document this feature for our developers. You also find me working on content, creating content in form of blog articles, video content, whether it's short form video content, because I found that to be very effective, or even YouTube video content. You also find me working on community events. I run the London meetup for Directus. And in terms of the audience that we are really focused on, I would say we're focused on developers that specialize mostly using JavaScript. So whether JavaScript frameworks like React or Vue, so those are like our main audiences. And we also focus on developers, front-end developers that do not really want to go through the hassle of creating their back end. So Directus is that platform that really helps you just spin up a back end in a matter of like few minutes. So yeah, it's really a mixed audience here.
Thank you so much. And so I'm Ray Stephenson. I'm head of developer relations engineering at Cisco. I've held all kinds of developer relations roles, from the individual contributor as an advocate a long time ago for Microsoft. I worked for Microsoft 21 years. As the role owner for all the developer advocates worldwide when their first developer relations efforts were starting up around 2000, 2001, and had a chance to interact with kind of every technology you can imagine Microsoft came out with during that time. And so, working with product teams, working with developers and partners and all different types of languages and technologies, both difficult kind of code as well as low code, no code. There was a movement at one point where there was Lotus Notes, if you remember. For those who remember this a while ago, Lotus Notes was kind of what I think of as the original low code departmental developer type platform. And when IBM bought it and kind of didn't invest a whole lot more into it, that provided an opportunity for almost literally everybody else to go after those people who still needed some kind of solution that a departmental person could put together themselves and get things to work. But what we're talking about is audiences. So what I'd like to do next is talk about kind of segmentation. There's different ways to think about segmentation. Some people say, one segment is the people who use this programming language or that programming language. Other people might say, I focus on junior developers, mid-career and senior developers. Others might use some other segmentation. So love to go around and just kind of ask, how do you think about segmentation for the people who use your platform? And Tessa, I know you kind of already alluded, you have both content creators as well as the developers. So maybe, are there any other distinctions about how you think about your audience?
Yeah, I think honestly, when it comes to developer relations in general, I like to think about them by motivation, right? So I know that we oftentimes see these personas that marketing usually helps us create, or sometimes they don't, and we're pulling those together. But personas are usually covering that, right? They're covering like, what is their geographical location? What languages do they use? What's their technology stack? Some of those different things that are going to define like who they are to an extent. And I think the thing that is often missed is like, what are they motivated by, right? Like, what is it that's going to bring them in and keep them here? Is it a product, feature or subset, right? Is it something else that they can gain out of that relationship? And oftentimes, as you start to bring them into your DevRel programs, thinking about champions or superfan type of programs, like, again, what is it that they're motivated by to be there? And so it's just something that's, I think, has really stuck with me and been a really, really impactful way to look at my different audiences is to look at it from that angle. So thinking about my current audience now, right, like these AR creators and these developers that can kind of start to integrate with, our SDK, it's like completely different audiences, but at the end of the day, they're sort of motivated by the same thing, right? They're trying to create AR experiences. And so when I take that motivation and start to look at that from the different lens of like, hey, so-and-so is motivated to get a new lens into the platform, right? Then they might fall into a category that does align with strong programming languages, web skills, maybe mobile app development skills, where there might be someone who can offer, some other form of skills. And bringing those two together, I think, is what has been incredibly impactful. So sort of taking a step back from your program and saying, hey, yeah, we know that these are the personas that we've defined, but like, how can we look deeper? What can we figure out and learn about that person to really, truly understand how we can impact and provide value to that audience and that they get what they want out of the relationship that they have with us?
I love that, thinking about motivation. What's you probably heard this, jobs to be done, which is like a whole movement out there, people focusing on this. And this is one way to think about it for sure. I will switch the order up and go to Esther next and say, and then I'll go to Kevin after.
Okay.
Help me understand about how you think about your audience segmentation.
Okay. For us, at Directus, I mentioned earlier that the core developers we focus on are developers that use JavaScript. So what I have found out has worked for us is actually segmenting our audience in terms of developers that use a particular JavaScript framework, for example, React, and then we create content that is, developer articles that are focused on React or Next.js, and then we segment our audience for developers that maybe use the Vue framework like Next.js. And, this really helps us to focus on one segment and another segment. And I found out that content like this really works because when developers see that you have content that is, resonates with them, frameworks that they're familiar with, they can easily just decide to go with a particular tutorial. They can easily clone the repo and just consume the content based on that. So in our company, this is how we segment our audience.
So sort of like, what do you know now? And here's a path for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And Kevin, how about yourself?
Well, first of all, what Tessa mentioned is perfect. Just thinking about what motivates them, it changed the whole world. Instead of just thinking about market research and the user personas, but actually, what motivates them. That's actually a great point of view. So I just wanted to highlight that, which it's really cool. One of the best books that I've read for me, which is a super small and simple book, is Start With Why from Simon Sinek. And I think that's also key when you're trying to think about user personas and how you define your audiences. What are their whys? And it's very similar to what you mentioned, Ray, about the jobs to be done from Professor Christensen. Why it's their need of using the different tool or platform that you are advocating for. And when you think about that and you leave the how and the what secondly and focus on the why, I think that's very key when defining audiences and user personas. Obviously, doing market research and conducting, understanding who they are is very important. Having analytics and feedback loops to understand how they're growing. But also for me, it's key to understand in what phase of the customer journey they are at. So for example, they don't know anything about our platform and we have to generate awareness for them. Give them what they need to step up first because they don't know anything about the platform. There might be others who are ahead of that step, and there may be in the portion where they're trying to activate. So I have to focus on activation for them. How do we bring them to use our business edition, or how can I empower them to build the second app, or how to use the application on another stages of their company? And then engagement, there might be already activated. They are doing applications with Appsmith that I have to engage with them to continuously make them grow. And then retention, which is obviously another portion of the customer journey, and retain them and giving them more of what they need, working next to the support team and giving them what they need in order to continue using the our platform in general. So not only thinking about personas, but also what portion of the journey they are at, and always focusing on the why instead of the what or the how.
Great. So I'll tell a little bit about our challenge here at Cisco. So Cisco is a little bit different in that it's a developer plus type of organization as opposed to a developer first. we aren't really selling to developers most of the time. The products are there, and then developers usually have to integrate with them and use the APIs. And our audience, the natural audience that Cisco has, is network engineers who are used to doing things on the command line. They may not really know how to code. They might do shell scripts as sort of the extent of what they're familiar with or comfortable with. And our whole goal is really to help them get comfortable with basic programming, usually through Python, allowing them to access the information that's kind of buried within all this equipment and then do something useful with it. So we think about it as like, that's one big segment of our audience. A second segment is kind of the DevOps SRE group, who's trying to monitor operations, and then they might try to get a little bit deeper. And then our third audience is really software developers. So for most people, the audience is all software developers, and it's the different segments within that. But for us, it's actually the role that kind of drives how we segment our content and how we develop it. If you think about channels, like, there's different ways. Like, obviously, every company has a website. That's one obvious channel. Twitter, I've heard, for communities like Flutter was like a really strong channel. Who knows what has happened now as Twitter became X, that kind of changed the dynamic a little bit there. You see some companies using like Discord, others using Slack. Like, how do you think about the channels you use to reach your different audiences? And I'll come back around to Tessa again to start us off on that one.
Well, I think, it really sort of depends on your audience again, right? So if you sort of think about what we just discussed in the last conversation about motivation and their why and what the audiences look like in terms of like their use cases and how they're serving out those products. I think all those people are in different places, right? They're going to be in different locations. It's going to be different social platforms versus others. Like in my case, a lot of AR creators are in Snapchat, right? Because they're creating those lenses. They're inside of that AR experience, inside of that app. And so we can reach them, through Snapchat, through like our native app, and like get to spend some time, like, sort of dog fooding our own product, right? But when you think about like the other side of it is like when I'm working with developers, I have to think about the channels that they're in. And they also are going to be developers that are a little bit more on the cutting edge side, right? Are they early in their career because they're just excited about new technology? Or are they mid-career and they're starting to shift into a new technology? Like obviously AR is a newer technology, and there aren't many who can say that they've been in it for most of their career or all of their career. And so I'm usually working with someone who's kind of coming in new. So I really, like to think about channels in, there isn't going to be like, my metrics are going to look like everyone else. I've got, this many X and Twitter followers. I've got this many, LinkedIn connections or likes or follows, right? It's going to be more about what are those little niche communities that your audience is spending time in, and how can that channel bring value back? And oftentimes I'm seeing these being like really niche developer communities that are brought together by volunteers or by people who are, like-minded, and they just want to be with their peers, right? And so it's a great place for DevRel to come in, be good stewards, volunteer, right? Listen for things that you're hearing from your company or opportunities that you might have. And just like play a role there, but obviously don't come in and sales pitch. And I think that is where I've actually found the most value, is to just go where they are, ingrain myself into where they like to be. And then hopefully eventually they start coming to my channels, right? Sorry, I'm sitting in my outdoor office, so there's a fly that really wants to get me. Anyways, they'll eventually come to our channels, right? Because they see us engaging, and they start to see that brand trust, and then begin to come to, the brand forum, which is at the end of the day going to be your best channel, right? Is wherever your developers are talking, engaging with one another, about your products. That's going to be, kind of your bread and butter, and where you want to nurture that channel the most. So it's kind of my 2 cents there.
That's actually a really great point, is that it's sometimes hard for smaller brands versus bigger brands to create, a channel for the developers to engage with them in. Like, there's the challenge is, if you're small, nobody is aware, right? So how do you make those developers aware of what you are? Where do you go to make them aware? This might be a good segue in for Kevin, since you're working with both Appsmith, but you're also working on this Google developer GDE. I don't know what the E stands for again, but you're seeing 2 sides of things. Like, one is a giant company who doesn't need to do any work to get developers to show up and check things out, and the other is a smaller company who is still, in that process of kind of building awareness. How would you kind of compare and contrast the approaches to using channels for those 2 things?
Well, like you mentioned, they're very different in shape or form. The first thing is you have this big and giant company, which is Google, and Google Cloud, which is where I'm focused on mostly, which is growing a lot and gaining a lot of the market share compared to AWS and IBM Cloud. And they don't need to be explained. People know what Google Cloud is, and if they go to these different events or they join to, for example, live streaming events because they want to learn about specific technologies on Google Cloud. If I'm explaining about Vertex AI, it's because people want to understand how to use Vertex AI and implement that on their day-to-day tools. But sometimes for Appsmith, that's not the case. We might have audiences that they don't even know they need us. They're just trying to understand what they need. And also they're trying to compare us to competitors. They might see other options out there, and they're trying to understand why Appsmith and why not other option that's could be similar in terms of no-code and low-code platform that can connect to their data and build something out for their to deploy to production. So definitely very different, but the mechanisms might be very similar as well. Like Tessa mentioned, go where they are. I think that also help us at Appsmith. It's, for example, attending physical events. I've gone to multiple local meetups, not only in my region, but also in other regions. And I think that that catchphrase also works a lot, which is from local to global. You have to start local. You have to work with your local communities because, again, the wording is probably one of the best marketing that still exists. Doing social media campaigns works, definitely. Being where they are works, but having people who actually sit down with you, open their machine, and you explain to them, build a sample app in just 2 minutes, that's even more impactful than having a 1 hour live stream. So obviously going from local to global is important. The other thing is interact and adapt. Just to give you an example, 2 months ago, we were not on TikTok, and people, they really didn't want it to go on TikTok because that's not where our market is. But I said, let's give it a shot. We have developers who might be just sitting around before they go to bed, just scrolling on TikTok, and we have got a lot of engagement, and a lot of people have this stigma around no-code and low-code platforms because they think it's just for POCs or small applications and they cannot go bigger. And I have seen so many transformation from that stigma, because most of the comments from people is, oh yeah, Appsmith looks cool, but I will use it just for maybe a POC. And the answer I always give is, why? Have you tried? And most of the people say, no, I haven't tried. And from there, I'm activating people, generating awareness, and they might be just looking for memes and things like that before they go to bed. And iterate and adapt. For example, we're also trying now on Twitch because we know some developers might be on Twitch, and maybe that won't work. Again, we tried, we invest some time on it, and we move on. If it doesn't work, we try to move on. But that's what I will say, definitely. Go where they are, try from local to global, and iterate and adapt.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And Esther, actually, this is totally how I found you first. Like when I was like, hey, I'm going to be working with Esther, I went and looked up your name and your company, and I found you on YouTube, found like a user meetup, and that was great. So love to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah, to add to what everyone has said, the way I like to think about it is internal channels and external channels. So internal channels are the channels that like you as a company, your community, your immediate community follows. So for example, your Discord community, that's like an internal channel. Maybe your YouTube channel is like an internal channel. So you want to make sure that you're creating content for your immediate community, but not just to focus on your internal channels. There are also external channels that developers that are not necessarily using your product, like where developers just congregate. So like dev.tu, what we do as a company is when we publish a blog, for example, on our marketing site, we also try to cross-post and post it to a platform like dev.tu. So even developers that are not necessarily maybe following us as a company, because that's like a platform that brings developers together, they're also able to identify our content and also engage with us as well. And Kevin mentioned TikTok. TikTok is also a platform that we as a company, we are looking to explore because developers are also on TikTok, and I've seen like GitHub, for example, they seem to have a very active community on TikTok. So those are like some of the channels that companies could explore, external channels that could probably help them just drive awareness about their products or even drive activation for their products. So yeah, that's what I just wanted to add.
It's funny that you bring up TikTok, both of you, and of course there's the YouTube Shorts, which I sometimes see people port their TikTok to YouTube Shorts. But does it just mean that everybody's attention span is just shorter and shorter, and that's like they can only learn in 30-second or 1 minute chunks? Is that it?
I'm afraid.
Yeah, to some extent, yeah, I think so.
What I have seen from my end is that, and that's also one thing that I mentioned yesterday on the conversation we had, is you can utilize AI tools that basically grab a big video, a big lengthy video that you might have on YouTube about explaining your product or why your product is great, or whatever type of long length video, like an interview as well. And you can use AI tools to repurpose that video for vertical format and just grab the highlights from that specific video and drive people to YouTube. So your audience might not be on YouTube. Your audience might not be on the blogs that you're writing or the written articles that you're writing, but you can drive them by generating some engagement, some hook from this short social media, small like type of what's the name of it? Like they basically ignite a lot of a spark on the people, like they're just scrolling over there. But if you cap their attention by 3 to 4 seconds, then you can drive them to the full length video because you capture from the same video the most highlighted portions of it. And again, that's using the right tools for the right mechanisms, and that's how you can leverage these social medias with short span of attention, definitely.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely one of the tricks of great marketers is they say any piece of content you create, no matter what format it is, try to repurpose it into like 7 other formats, and then use intermittent reinforcement to keep pushing it through the different channels, so that you created one thing today, but then you got like 8 or 9 weeks worth of visits and traffic and awareness from that one thing. And of course, I think when you're working with developers, it's probably a little easier than working with network equipment, but we try.
Yeah, just to add to what you mentioned now, like repurposing content, that's one of the things we also do. For example, like long form tutorials, the blog articles, what we also do, or what I've started doing at the company, is to just repurpose them into short YouTube shorts or TikTok formats, and I found out they also perform very well.
It's great advice for all the DevRelers out there who are looking for ways to expand their reach. I don't think we have tons of time left, so I'm going to ask one last question before we kind of wrap up. So I'm thinking about feedback loops. So one of the ways that when I was at Microsoft that we tried to measure the impact of developer advocates was not just number of talks, the quality of the talks, the reach, that kind of reach number, but also the impact that they had back to the product teams. So, can you talk a little bit about, I'm going to go to each of you and talk a little bit about how you've taken some of the input, the feedback that comes through these channels that you're reaching out to these different audiences, and where you took that back to the product team, they were able to make a modification or a change that was like a net positive for the company. And I will switch them, go to Esther first, since I haven't gone to you first yet.
Yeah, so one of the ways we've gotten feedback is a feature we recently launched, content versioning. We pre-launched it like a month back, and since it was a pre-launch, we released it in our Discord community, so developers could instantly just give us feedback in terms of like different terminologies. Some said that it was sounding too developer GitHub-like, and we just had to rephrase it. And even in terms of the feature of the way the feature worked, like they mentioned that it could be easier. So based on that feedback, we were able to then iterate. The product team was able to iterate and just make it work better and smoother. And very recently on Monday, we launched that feature, and we've gotten lots of, well, I say very good positive feedback based on just the improvements that we made. And another thing we do at Directus is on every of our documentation, we have like a feedback widget at the bottom that just helps whoever is using that documentation to just instantly drop their feedback. So we have like a 1 to 5 rating, where 1 is like, okay, this documentation is crap, it's not good, and 5 is like, okay, very good documentation. So when we get all of this feedback, we have it in our back end on our application. So we're just able to work on it, and just it points us in the right direction to just know, okay, this particular documentation probably needs to be revamped, or this particular feature probably needs to be re-explained. So these are some of the ways that we get feedback from our community and also incorporate it into our product.
Fantastic. Kevin, you're up next. How did you take some feedback and bring it back to the product team?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, before like explaining the bits and bytes, I will say that striving for your audience involves making them feel valuable and providing meaningful solutions for the problems is key. Like effective DevRel, it's not just about promoting a product or a platform, but about building a genuine and supportive community that developers want to be part of. So this approach fosters like a long-term relationship and ensures that your efforts align with the needs and aspirations of your audiences. So in order to do that, you just not have to publish content and forget about it. You have to be always in the loop of after you publish the content, what are they talking about? So obviously enabling them the capability for reacting to your content and commenting on your pieces of content is key. And not just, publishing a video on YouTube and forget about the comments. Like, for example, in our case, we get a lot of people feedback on YouTube videos because maybe we post a tutorial and some of them say it's not working for me, or I've done it differently, or my company does not use what you propose. Maybe there's another workaround. So the first thing is hearing your developer community where they are at. If they're on Discord and you publish content in Discord, be aware of what they're saying. That's the first portion. Secondly, we have our support team also on Discord, and we have other streams of communication with the support team. So not only us going back to the product and saying, hey, we have feedback about the different contents that we're publishing, and maybe we can change the direction of the different efforts that we're building for the next iteration. Also hearing from the support team back to the product, and the product and the support team back to us, it's really helpful. So normally I go to the different support reports that they gave about what people are actually maybe complaining or having hard time to implement, and I create content on those topics. Maybe, for example, one of the most the biggest example that I can give is about OAuth 2 authentication. We support OAuth 2 out of the box, but it's not it's not easy to implement. It's kind of hard, and it has multiple flavors depending on the integration you're trying to achieve. So we build out a lot of content around OAuth 2, a series of publishing videos and articles around OAuth 2, because we got that feedback from the support team. The support team also goes back to the product and say, hey, can we enhance how we implemented the OAuth 2 authentication flow? And in the meantime, while they prioritize that work, I'm going to be creating content for the audience who are trying to achieve OAuth 2 authentication. So I will say, at least for us, it's kind of circular. Us to product to support to us, and all the way around as well.
Yeah, that's a great to highlight that kind of circle where where a company has a support channel that that used to be something Microsoft was really good at. They would actually have somebody who was in charge at the top, kind of crunching all that data, and would present out to the different product leaders at a senior level and saying, like, here's what customers are complaining about, and here's what we're going to do about it in terms of creating content or changing the product or giving guides or whatever. So Tessa, how about Snapchat?
Yeah, well, I think like in this conversation, I feel like I'd like to actually go just a little bit more vague, because I think there's a little more value to the kind of way that I look at this versus an actual use case. So when I actually think about feedback, I mean, each feedback, let me take a step back from there actually. Whenever I create anything that is DevRel, right, that I need to track any amount of impact or or really any value on, is I always define what the CTA is, right? Like, why am I doing something? What is my call to action to do that? What do I want my end user to do? And then if my end user does that CTA, then I'm like, yay, right? That's how I win. And so I look at feedback the same way. And so thinking about feedback is like, what is the piece of feedback that comes in, right? Like, Kevin and Esther were speaking to able to make documentation improvements, able to make content improvements. And those are things that actually we're working through right now at Snap. Like, we're in that phase, right, of like, hey, these were our MVP content resources. How can we improve them? And I think coming out of all of those pieces of feedback, right, is like really thinking about what is the value out of that. If someone does come in and say, hey, here's my feedback for docs, right? Like the value for docs feedback is like, it could be huge, right? Because if somebody else comes in and is able to get past a hurdle that they couldn't get past before, right? That's big. So what is that traffic? What is that opportunity? What did they gain by making that improvement? And not all of that stuff is really easy to figure out. Sometimes it takes a data whiz to start going through and thinking about, hey, if we improve this docs, how much more traffic did we get after that? Did it mean that it was improved? Like, did we avoid, support tickets that came through, right? And I think really thinking about that core problem that you're trying to solve with the feedback is how you should go about that impact. Because it's all going to be different, whether it's a product feature that someone is suggesting, whether it's a product bug, right? Because that could be saving you thousands of dollars with, SLAs if somebody finds a bug that's causing issues. There's really just so much value. And so depending on your pricing model, depending on, the impact and value of your team, what you're trying to accomplish, what your product team is trying to accomplish, there's just so many, aspects that go into what is the actual impact of feedback. And it can just be anything from millions of dollars, right, to hundreds of users that you've removed hurdles for. And that is something you want to brag about.
So I'll share a story from my past at Microsoft. So there's actually a time when I was doing a global 100, top C++ customers type effort with the product team. And the goal was to say like, okay, let's get 100 partners and customers who use Microsoft C++ to share some feedback on these new features. And at the time they were creating extensions to allow interaction between C++ itself and managed code, the .NET stuff. And they had some preconceived notions, the product team, product marketing, what was going to happen. And as I ran these workshops around the world, something arose that nobody anticipated. It turned out that like a vast majority of these customers, the current in production app that they were using today had been built on a sample that they had released like 10 or 15 years prior. And the sample was called Scribble. And Scribble used something called Microsoft Foundation classes, which is a much older version of how you create windowed applications on Windows. And the product team was like, we completely missed this. And so they had to go back and write, a whole bunch of content and saying, how do you take, a pre-existing, Microsoft Foundation classes application and extend it with a modern, at the time, modern Windows look and feel using all this new technology they had created. So it was easy to point to that and say, like, here's a huge impact. Like the company would have released this product and completely missed this huge segment of the market that just was stuck with legacy. And they would be like, I don't even know how to use it because there's no guidance, no documentation at all on that particular topic. So that was a good catch from that perspective. So anyway, wrapping up here, I'd love to go around and say, any kind of captures in terms of like a short phrase or two, saying what would you give to advice to somebody else who's running a DevRel program, working with developers, like how should they think about segmenting their audience? I already heard one is like go where they are, but that one I think is out there in the DevRel lore. So I'll challenge you to come up with something else. And we'll go
I can start.
All right.
Okay, mine is not really focused on like segmentation, but it's more on content. So as someone that has created lots of content and in various channels, I'll just like to say it's best to focus on the value, and it's not really about the number of contents or the quantity, but more on quality. So whatever piece of content that you're creating for your segment or for your audience, it's best to maybe ask yourself two questions. Why would someone really care about this content? And what would they learn from this content? And when you're able to ask yourself these questions, you can then create content that is valuable, something that probably teaches them or entertains the developer, because developers love to be entertained, whether it's memes or GIFs or like whatever piece of content. Just make sure that it's creating value, adding value to the person that's consuming your content. Yeah, so Excellent. That's my last word.
Excellent. All right, Tessa.
I think just reiterating what I had already shared of like being CTA driven, right? Like everything we do is going to come back to some type of call to action. And I think when we can convert our minds from thinking about views and followers and likes and those very vanity metrics we can really get to like the root of the impact that we're actually driving and truly report that in a more meaningful way. So just really thinking about like, what's that call to action that you're building that piece of content for, and like, what do you want the end user to do? And with that, like, that's how you should think about the impact and you know, metric that you can track on that.
Great. Kevin, last words.
So in my case, I will say, echoing the word from Esther and Tessa, that's obviously great. Be CTA driven and all of those stuff. I will say it's definitely important. But my contribution will be authentic. I think well polished videos and articles are great, but people also buy why you do it. They don't buy what you do. And when people feel a connection with you, it's because you are being authentic. Just to give an example, you know, we create a lot of tutorials in our end, but today I talked to one of our DevRel and said, you know, let's just do a live stream very openly and let's do live coding. No script prepare, no anything created. Let's debug. And we had issues during the live stream creating the Appsmith application, and we solved them. And at the end of the session, we got so many great feedback because we use Luma as a platform. And at the end of the session, Luma asked for feedback. And a lot of people, sometimes they don't even say yes or no. They just delete the email. But from this session, we got tons of good feedback saying, this helped me a lot because I was struggling with the same as you did. With some JavaScript library that I was trying to create from HTML to PDF. And, you know, the comments, they say, hey, can you show us an example from HTML to PDF on Appsmith? And say, yeah, let's do it. Let's try to find a library. Let's import the library. Let's do an app. And which kind of struggled, but we fixed it. And I think that really strive a lot, because being authentic means also that you're caring about them. Yeah, you can send swag or you can create videos. That's fun. But true DevRel is about adding value, offering support, and helping developers succeed. It's all about relationships, not just giveaways or well-created videos that they might not even understand or continue with. So I will say that my recommendation to any DevRel out there is just be authentic.
Great. And I will add on top of all those, keep it fun. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to look up some topic I didn't know, and I find a really, you know, monotone, not excited about this kind of YouTube video, and you're like, okay, next. So, you know, obviously when you spend some time trying to make it fun, relatable, use interesting examples, you know, tackle challenges that you've seen come up in forums or from support, you're helping them and you're making it fun. So with that, I want to thank everybody so much for your time today for the panel. And I see Steve's there waiting to move us on to the end of the show. We're the last ones up. So hopefully people will make it to our part of the stream later on when they watch this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ray, and the panel, Tessa, Kevin, and Esther. A great discussion to sign off with. Thanks. And yeah, this brings us to the end of this year's DevRelX Summit. I hope you had a great time and have some useful takeaways. Muscula, if you're there, over to you to say bye for now.
Yes. Hi, everyone. And to close up, thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you to our sponsors and our speakers. I'm seriously in awe every time we run an event, the efforts and investments that everyone takes to help us run all of this, the speakers and the sponsors as well. There's a ton of time investment and, of course, resources to run these. So thank you, everybody. On another note, make sure to check your inbox in a bit, as we will be sending you a special goodie bag, and don't forget to respond to our developer program leader survey. It's really short, I promise you. If you wish to revisit the sessions, they'll become available on demand very soon, and we will let you know on the DevRelX channel as soon as they are there. From all of us here at /Data, have a great day, and let's stay in touch. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.